You are trying to erase black people, and a lot of black people wouldn't mind some of that erasure as long as that black person is Clarence Thomas. A billionaire named Harlan Crow is flying Clarence Thomas all over the world on unreported trips, like an Instagram model, taking Clarence to the Maldives and the beaches and all. Paid for his mama's house, this billionaire. Paid for Clarence Thomas' mama's house. I gotta give it up to billionaires. Billionaires, boy, y'all are relentless. Y'all always come up with something new to buy. Like, just when you think of everything you could buy on Earth, a billionaire will come up with a new thing. Y'all buy space rockets, you bought Twitter. This man bought a Supreme Court justice. Do you understand how rich you have to be to buy a black one on top of that? There's only 2 in stock. And Harlan Crow owns half the inventory. We can all see Clarence Thomas, but he belongs to billionaire Harlan Crow. And that's what an NFT is.
This absolutely brutal joke from Roy Wood Jr. has aged like a fine wine as more and more info has come to light detailing the dark depths of Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas's corruption and his pay-to-win scheme to consolidate power among the ultra-wealthy while stripping us of our constitutional rights.
Dallas tycoon Harlan Crow's controversial collection includes Hitler's notorious autobiography Mein Kampf, signed by Hitler, oil paintings by Hitler, and linen napkins embroidered with the Nazi swastika.
Meet the billionaire who bought Clarence Thomas, Harlan Crow.
The more this looks like the biggest scandal the court has seen in generations. It may even be the biggest since 1969, when Supreme Court Justice Abe Fortas was forced to resign after his financial dealings with a wealthy donor came to light. So let's just run through what we know about Clarence Thomas and his friend Harlan Crow so far, because just the details themselves are damning. So last week, ProPublica, incredible reporting, broke the story about the lavish gifts Thomas has received from his billionaire buddy. For 20 years, Thomas has been joining Crow on vacations. There's Leonard Leo right there, the guy that runs the Federal Society. And that's Crow on the far right, seated next to Thomas. Now, crucially, and this is really, really key, Thomas never reported any of this at all on his financial disclosure forms. That appears to be a clear violation of a law passed after the Watergate scandal that requires justices to disclose most gifts.
When reports first surfaced last year detailing the yacht rides, including one to Russia in the early 2000s, private jet trips, lavish vacations, and real estate dealings between the two, Thomas went radio silent and let Harlan Crow and the MAGA base run cover for him until he faced enough public pressure to release this frankly insulting statement trying to justify his actions.
Early in his tenure on the court, quote, he was advised that this sort of personal hospitality from close personal friends who did not have business before the court was not reportable.
But this is just the tip of the iceberg, considering what would eventually come to light.
Most recently, in January 2018, we found the justice was flown out there on a private jet, gave a talk to a small dinner of high-dollar Koch donors, people that gave over $1 million, and none of this was disclosed as it should have been on his annual financial disclosures. Justice Thomas has been going there for years. He's a regular there with Harlan Crow, and he stays in this camp, which is essentially like a fraternity with a couple dozen men, and other members of that camp include Charles and David Koch. It's called Midway.
So not only has Thomas been island hopping with Crow when away from the court, but he has consistently been taken to the Bohemian Grove camp over the years to rub elbows with even more connected and powerful people like the aforementioned Koch brothers and other political and corporate elites.
The justice developed this relationship and bond with the Kochs on these trips to the Bohemian Grove, which really answers a question in part that we've been wondering about, which is what is going on all these trips and vacations that Harlan Crow is taking Justice Thomas on. It turns out part of the answer is, he's spending time with people like the Kochs who have active interests and, in fact, cases at the Supreme Court.
For context, any other federal judge sitting in a lower court would almost certainly be removed from the bench if they were caught at any political fundraising event, let alone the secretive, elitist, all-men's retreat in the middle of a redwood forest in California with the most powerful people in the country together in one spot. However, since SCOTUS justices have no rigid code of ethics and have no meaningful oversight from Congress or the executive branch, they can get away with selling out our country right under our noses with no consequences.
We've had judges who have taken bribes and been impeached for it. We've had judges who have sexually harassed clerks. We've had judges who have engaged in party activity. We've had judges who've owned human beings as enslaved people. So there's nothing magic about being a judge or a justice. I mean, do any of you believe that there's some reason that we shouldn't have an ethics code that binds judicial officers the way we have binding ethics codes on legislative officers or executive officers? Is there any reason? Yeah. Mr. Aronson?
More than that, Ranking Member Raskin, I think there's reason to have higher standards for justices who are supposed to be impartial and to hold themselves above reproach. And as we've learned from this past year's devastating scandals, are very clearly not living up to that higher standard that they should be held to.
That's the crux of the entire scandal surrounding Clarence Thomas as well as Justice Samuel Alito. The Supreme Court has had unchecked power for so long that we're now seeing the logical outcome of giving morally bankrupt judges like Thomas Alito and the other conservatives on the court lifetime access to shape the country in the image their billionaire far-right donors want to see. All you need to do is look at this damning poster from Jamie Raskin's staff to put the magnitude of the wealth we're dealing with into perspective.
In brand new financial disclosure statements, Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas is now acknowledging controversial luxury trips in 2019 paid for by billionaire Harlan Crow.
This report today is kind of interesting because he has an amendment to his 2019 report in which he says he had inadvertently omitted a couple of trips, one of which was to Bali with Harlan Crow, and another one was to the Bohemian Grove private club in California, also with Harlan Crow.
And just last month, Thomas finally disclosed and admitted to taking trips to Bali and the Bohemian Grove with Crow through an amendment to his 2019 financial disclosure report.
The bar all the way on the left. That's it. That's Clarence Thomas. All the other Supreme Court justices are just all those little nubs. Clarence Thomas has received an estimated $4 million in gifts, much of which, as you see between those two colors, right, undisclosed and disclosed, almost half of which, maybe 40% of which, was never disclosed. And that's all that we know so far, by the way. There may be more undisclosed.
This graph from the watchdog group Fix the Court should be infuriating regardless of your political leanings, but as we know, the Supreme Court has always been a political institution, so unless we see some bipartisan efforts to wrangle in these rogue justices, sadly, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's efforts to fix the court will fall flat.
I rise today to introduce articles of impeachment against Associate Justices of the Supreme Court Clarence Thomas and Samuel Anthony Alito, Jr. To note that Justice Thomas's relationship to the billionaire only began after Thomas's powerful appointment to our nation's highest court. Justice Thomas not only accepted these contributions while Mr. Crow had business in front of the court, but he accepted them in secret, failing for years and years to report them. Yet Thomas did report smaller gifts during this time, demonstrating a clear understanding of his legal obligation to report. Would a reasonable American question that receiving lavish gifts from Mr. Crow might lead Justice Thomas to have a bias towards his, quote, friend with business before the court? Without a doubt, yes. Justice Thomas, who is married to Virginia Thomas, a financially and personally involved operative in the Stop the Steal movement and Capitol attack, also joined opinions in these cases, even as clear evidence mounted that not only was his wife fully committed to overthrowing the results of a fair election, but she was actively lobbying members of the Trump administration attempting to do just that.
Don't think we didn't forget about Clarence Thomas's wife, Ginni.
Just 3 days after the election, Thomas sent this message: do not concede. It takes time for the army who is gathering for his back, referring to former President Donald Trump. And on November 24th, when Biden had officially been declared the winner, she sent this: I can't see Americans swallowing the obvious fraud. Just going with one more thing, no freaking consequences. The whole coup and now this. We just gave to people wanting Biden to be appointed. We just caved to people wanting Biden to be appointed. Many of us can't continue the GOP charade.
Without action against these blatant violations, reasonable Americans have and will continue to lose faith in the court itself. Lastly, we cannot ignore the most important material consequences of this court's unchecked corruption and its resulting influence: the suffering of the American people.
This is exactly why money in politics is so dangerous. Ordinary American citizens are left to deal with the consequences of the ruling class's pet projects while their power only continues to grow.